I just want to have a little bit of a chat about, well, the latest green entreaties to us. Again and again and again, we are told that we must be more green, we must protect the planet. It's a climate emergency. We have to change our lives irrevocably. We have to spend £1 trillion of our hard taxpayers' money by reaching net zero emissions by 2050. The only country to pledge to do so. The only country that will put ourselves in economic dire straits to do so as well. Meanwhile, everybody at Glastonbury is cheering on Sir David Attenborough. Oh, isn't it wonderful getting rid of plastic? Well, you only have to look at the pictures of the clear-up to see quite how eco those Glastonbury goers were. 200,000 of them left. Huge number of, amazingly, plastic bottles, given that it was a plastic-free festival. Rubbish left everywhere, strewn everywhere. Hundreds of tents left there as well. So much for being eco there. And then we have the royals, the likes of Meghan and Harry, telling us we really need to cut our carbon footprint. We really shouldn't fly everywhere, from a couple who've travelled hundreds of thousands of miles in the last year, not just for official tours, but even for a hen party in New York, because, of course, God forbid you'd have your hen party in the city where you live. And then today, the latest story from scientists who've clearly got nothing better to do with their time, telling us that apparently barbecues are bad for the planet. They're as bad as, wait for it, driving 90 miles. Well, I think we probably all enjoyed our barbecues over the weekend of that wonderful sweltering heat. And you know what? Human beings, pretty much since time began, since they started cooking their food, have effectively been barbecuing their food for millennia. And the planet is still here. I am so fed up of being told what we can and can't do. And so fed up of people who claim to be green, living totally hypocritical lives where they don't live it themselves, but tell everyone else what to do. It's one rule for them, it's one rule for the rest of us. Unless you're going to live it 100%, why not just shut up and leave the rest of us to live our own lives? You think that your demonstration, your protest yesterday was justified, wearing those rude T-shirts in European Parliament. You wouldn't have been allowed into the House of Commons wearing something like that because it would have been seen as disrespectful to democracy, including the fact that your message was pretty disrespectful to 52% of the population. What did you think of the Brexit Party's demonstration when they turned their backs when the Ode to Joy anthem was played? Did you think that was acceptable as well? Because that was the manifesto they were elected on, in the same way that was the manifesto you were elected on.
I thought it was absolutely disgusting and childish and disrespectful.
No, I have to say, I thought it was... No, Caroline, I wouldn't think disgusting. I definitely thought childish, definitely thought it was inappropriate. I would not have taken part in such a demonstration, even though I'm a Brexiteer. But why was their protest disgusting, but you wearing a rude word on a T-shirt saying rude words to basically 52% of the population of this country? Why was your protest not disgusting?
Because what they were doing was turning their backs on an anthem, being played by young amateur musicians in the chamber. They were disrespecting a parliament to which they have been elected democratically. They say it's democratic, but they were elected in an election. You don't get much more democratic than that. And, yet they hypocritically will come here and take their salaries and all their expenses to a parliament that they don't respect. I mean, how...
Why is it hypocritical for them to take... If they're doing the job, why is it hypocritical? I mean,
they're not doing a job.
Aren't they? You're not doing a job either.
They turn up, they sit down, they turn their backs, and they go home.
To be fair, you turned up, sat down, and then you got to go away. You still got paid for doing what you did yesterday, wearing a stupid, embarrassing T-shirt.
I had a 15-hour day yesterday and was still in a meeting at 11 o'clock at night. I shouldn't imagine any of the Brexit Party were doing that. Isn't that just a total embarrassment that we've got 28, 29 people here who are behaving like that?
But I'm very happy. But I'm perfectly happy, and I think lots of people, Caroline, would share your criticism of what the Brexit Party MEPs did yesterday. I didn't. I tweeted about it. It's not something I would have done. I thought it was childish. I thought it was embarrassing. But I thought what your party did was equally childish and embarrassing. And I find it interesting that you think that what you did was a totally justified demonstration, and what the Brexit Party did was absolutely disgusting, in your words. Do you not see that both demonstrations actually embarrassed our country and embarrassed our politics?
I don't believe that wearing a T-shirt that said "Stop Brexit."
That's not what it said on the back, though, is it?
But if the photos were taken from the front,
there were plenty of photos taken from the back.
Julia, I'm supposed to be in the chamber voting for our new president, so I'm really going to have to go. Because
OK, well, try and wear something that makes you look like a grown-up today. That's what I would suggest. And I would say to the MEPs on the Brexit Party, try to behave appropriately. You're representing our country. Can everyone just try and behave? Some of them have had pay cuts, some of them have had pay rises, but overall, the wage bill has gone up. Good value for money?
Well, Gary Lineker jumps out at me, Julia. 1.75 million for presenting Match of the Day. By my calculations, that would pay for 11,363 TV licences for pensioners. How can the BBC justify charging pensioners £154 for an annual TV licence and pay people like Gary Lineker 1.75 million? What's really iniquitous about this, the real scandal, is that the BBC negotiated a deal in 2015. And I use the word deal because that's the word the BBC used to describe it. And the deal was, if you, the government, renew our charter and allow us to increase the TV licence year on year from the moment we renew our charter, then we will take on responsibility for providing free TV licences for the over 75s. That was a deal. You can Google it. It's on the BBC website. It's exactly as I just described it. And then the BBC, having got the charter renewed, having increased the TV licence fee in 2016 and in 2017 and in 2018, have now said, actually, we can't afford to pay for TV licences for the over 75s. They're going to have to pick up that bill themselves. That's and they're going to pay for some, but only the poorest. The other 3.7 million are going to have to pay for them themselves. So they've completely welched on that deal. And they turn around now and say, oh, yes, but we've closed the gender pay gap because, as you pointed out, the bottom 3 in the top 10 are now women. I mean, what kind of logic is this? Well, we're going to make pensioners, some of whom, can barely afford to pay for gas and electricity, pay £154 a year just for the privilege of owning a television set. But it's okay because Vanessa Feltz and Claudia Winkleman and Zoe Ball, we're paying them over $350,000 a year. So that's all right.
Crucial's also announced a pledge to put an extra 20,000 police on the streets within 3 years. Now, an extra 20,000 coppers is going to cost £1 billion a year. He says that money that would either be borrowed or from the £26 billion headroom we're told has been set aside by Phil Hammond to cope with a no-deal Brexit. But, of course, why do we need these 20,000 extra police? Is it just because we've lost 22,000 since we've had a Tory government? In which case, aren't you just backing somebody who's just going to put right the wrongs of the last few years?
Well, I think to a certain extent, Julia, I think we should be honest about this. The fact is police numbers have fallen from just over 140,000 in 2010 to about 120,000 now. I speak as an Essex MP, and I can tell you now, over the last year to this year, we have gone to the government to ask for more money for increased police numbers. And that is because of the changing nature of crime. Crime is an issue. People feel insecure when it comes to crime in their communities. And it's right that as the party that believes in law and order and supports the police, that we do much more now that we have fiscal headroom to start investing in our police force all over again.
And there's no doubt this will be a popular move. But again, we have seen pledges to increase the number of police officers on the streets from the current government. And yet we've only seen, I think, an extra 500 police or something who've actually been recruited in recent years, while we still see many more police officers taking early retirement and resigning. There's no chance in the world he's going to find an extra 20,000 officers in the next 3 years.
Well, I think actually he will. And I use Essex as an example because we have been recruiting more police officers from the additional money that we've managed to secure. We actually got 3.3 million from central government, and the 16.8 million has come from an increase in the precept, which is £2 extra month, an increase for local ratepayers. But there's been a massive police recruitment drive, and I can tell you locally in Essex it is working. So there's no reason why, through our police and crime commissioners, 60% of whom are backing Boris in this campaign as well, there is no reason why we cannot achieve the increased police numbers that Boris is proposing. And I think actually across our communities, residents will support this move.
Now, of course, there's been a lot more scrutiny of these policies as we get closer and closer. Those ballot papers going out in a couple of days to Tory party members, 160,000 of whom are going to get to choose whether they want Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt as their leader, and of course our next Prime Minister. And a lot more scrutiny of those spending pledges. I mean, Jeremy Hunt, an awful lot of spending pledges as well, no doubt at all about it. But Boris Johnson, more money for the police, more money for schools. He wants to increase the public sector pay, cuts in income tax, raising the threshold 40% tax, cuts in national insurance across the board, a cut in stamp duty. There's an awful lot of pledges. How are they all going to be paid for? Because even John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, said you've got your own magic money tree.
Well, that is definitely not true. And I can say this as a former Treasury Minister myself, who was around during the really difficult days when we were trying to get public finances back on track. There is fiscal headroom. Now, there is fiscal headroom of approximately £26 billion. And so really, this is about choices, Julia. You know, it is about time we used our fiscal policy levers to support investment and growth in our communities, to close the opportunity gap by investing in education and skills, but also using those levers to invest again in public services. So I think it's right that Boris has spoken about, yes, investing in police officers, yes, investing in education. He's spoken this week to my colleagues in local government as well in terms of how we can do much more to invest in local government and delivering services such as special educational needs and social care. That is right that we do that off the back of something else that only Boris has spoken about, which is actually creating an economy of growth. So having the right kind of investment that can generate income from road and rail, but actually being much more catalytic in terms of our economic growth across the region.
Do you believe, Peter, that there is actually a direct correlation between the fall in police numbers and what we have seen as a 19% increase in violent crime since 2010? So not crime that people perceive or, like the hate crimes where it's, subjective, but provable, people being stabbed, being robbed, being mugged, or in actually the number of murders, that we have seen that increase. Do you think that's directly as a result, at least in part, of those cuts in police numbers?
The causes behind the rises in crime are multiple, complex and not entirely straightforward as a result. But there is a correlation between police numbers and not only the rise in crime, but the police's ability to properly deal with crime, give victims the service they so desperately need and deserve, and then consequently investigate those crimes. 20,000 uniformed police officers would be a bit of a large step towards the police having greater capacity to actually police the streets. But actually what is needed is detectives, back office roles, and I know some people shudder at the thought of me saying that, but it is absolutely vital. Policing needs to be joined up from those officers at the front line in uniform to those officers who are so rarely seen, those detectives who gather, collate, disseminate the information and the evidence and consequently get people put in front of a court. But of course the entire criminal justice system is largely broken and underfunded. So this won't be one quick fix to have us living in a crime-free nirvana.
Boris Johnson today was saying that Britain is the greatest place on earth as he made his pitch to the 160,000 party members who are going to get their ballot papers today. On his first day in number 10, he said, "I will set out a vision for Britain as the greatest place on earth, the greatest place to be, the greatest place to live, to raise a family, greatest place to send your kids to school, the greatest place to breathe clean air, to start a business, the place where you'll find the most exciting tech scene, the most exciting academic culture, the most cutting-edge businesses of all kinds, but also a place where we improve the environment, we've improved quality of life for everybody because we're united the country and bringing it together. That's what I want to do." I think there's a lot of people who would love to feel that way about this country, but perhaps don't at the current time. Do you think an awful lot of Boris Johnson's pitch and a lot of his appeal to party members, to MPs like yourself, and maybe in the future at an election, ordinary voters, is sort of just a positivity after this rather dour managerial style we've seen from Theresa May for the last 3 years? But is there any detail to back it up?
Well, the answer is I do think Boris has. I think this is why Boris is attracting so much support. He has this ability to create a feel-good vision for this country and make people feel good about this country again after we've been through, as you say, a rather sort of paralysing period of indecision over Brexit. I mean, we've got to get Brexit done, but I think the important thing is that Boris has got a much, much broader vision for the future of the country than Brexit. And we've got so many great assets in this country. We've got 4 of the top 10 universities in the world in this country. We've got fantastic science and technology. We've got the world's global financial centre. We've got so much literature and art and music, and there's so much going for this country and our connections throughout the world because of our history, the historical legacy of the Commonwealth and everything. We've got so much going for us, and it's time we talked it up instead of talking ourselves down.
Well, in terms of talking up, the current Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, has the front page of the Daily Express today, saying the next Prime Minister must turbocharge plans for leaving the EU on October the 31st. And he said that we will be ready, even if there is no deal, and warned that the chances of leaving without an agreement are far higher than expected by businesses. And he called on Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt to be ready to seize the opportunities of a no-deal Brexit. I imagine you would concur with that.
Absolutely. I think there's the present government, Theresa May's government, has put a lot of fear about, stopped ministers making reassuring announcements about work that's being done and tasks that have been completed to prepare for Brexit. And that's because basically we have a government at the moment that thought the best way to leave the EU was to try to keep everything the same as possible, with a very cumbersome withdrawal agreement that is phrased in exactly the same way as the existing treaties and all the EU agreements we've already got. That's kind of what people voted against when they voted to leave the European Union.
How do your loved ones feel about this campaign and what you want to do?
They're behind me in the fact that no, I won't be taking this unless it's absolutely necessary, and I can't cope with it anymore.
And tell me about why you feel it is something that you would consider, why you feel you wouldn't cope.
It's more, I've seen people over the years that have needed something like this and they've been crying out for help. Some of these people have been in hospital lasting up to, it could be 2-3 years, just screaming out for help in pain, and of course the help's not coming.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing they can do really is medication. And so that gets stronger and stronger. My feelings on it is just they knock you out more and more.
And then you're not you anymore, really.
No.
I mean, and that's the thing, isn't it? And your argument is, but look, because you're disabled, you're being discriminated against because an able-bodied person would have this option, and that you, as a disabled person, should also have this option. Are you saying this is a fundamental, basic human right to choose whether to live or die?
That's what we're fighting for.
But the interesting thing is that the campaigning on this seems to have persuaded the public over the years. I'm always fascinated by when you talk to many medics and people who've worked in care homes, those who've had loved ones who have been very elderly or been very, very sick or disabled, who were very much on board with this. And yet every attempt to get the law changed in Parliament has failed. Are our elected representatives, our MPs and MPs, are they lagging behind public's view on this, do you think? And if so, why?
Absolutely. I think they're scared. It's such a big law to tackle. I think people are scared of it.